So I got a very nice email from someone that found my channel. So I'll start with parts of their first email, their questions. I'll read off my the relevant parts of my reply, and then they sent some really nice follow-up questions, which I will reply to in this video. So I'll read their, it'll be them, me, them, and then me in this video. Okay. So this particular student, they mentioned being poor, which I really empathize with, that they've been poor for a long time, but they haven't given up on math. And in particular, they went through the full undergraduate sequence, but they weren't able to get through the abstract algebra sequence, which I also, my cats are a little spicy today, which I also really empathize with. So they mentioned that they really do love math and want to do research, and they were wondering if I had any advice on navigating the academic landscape with a non-neurotypical profile. So in reply, thank you again for reaching out. I said that I'm very happy that they decided to take the leap and come back to mathematics, because after finishing their undergrad, they chose a different major but decided to try and finish up the missing credits so that they could pursue a PhD program. And I just remarked that we're both on the same page with how difficult math can be, so I'll be straightforward with any advice. And as always, not just with this person, but with anyone watching, I encourage you to consult second opinions and question everything I say. So my advice to start was to just try and identify what gave you so much trouble about the abstract algebra sequence. And I know that's hard to do when it was maybe hard to even grasp the subject to begin with. And I understand, because abstract algebra was easily one of the most difficult topics that I ever studied. Identifying these problems can be a very helpful step towards addressing them. It's also possible that similar topics might come up in more advanced classes, or if you join a PhD program where abstract algebra is a required first-year exam topic. And I believe that's the case at my department at UF, for example, but it does vary a lot by department. It's also generally good to be as well-rounded of a mathematician as possible, even if your research interests have nothing to do with abstract algebra. You'd be surprised at how many concepts reappear at totally unexpected times, especially during research. That said, note that I did say as possible. I'm an absolutely terrible mathematician, objectively one of the worst in my department, but it's okay, because I do my best to make sense of the methods that I use and try to look a bit broader beyond that. But in the end, my field and research doesn't need a lot of sophisticated mathematical methods. The difficult parts are elsewhere. So anyway, something that I haven't done a good job emphasizing on this channel, because I didn't realize until very recently, is that quality answers about how to study with ADHD are really, really, really hard to come by. In my opinion, lots of answers are kind of cheap and not really all that helpful. For example, so cheap is a really disparaging word. Maybe I should use something else, but there are lots of very, very good ADHD channels out there about how to study. But especially the bigger ones, they're aimed towards a very broad audience. And so one of the reasons why I started this channel is because when I was an undergrad in college struggling with math, there was no resources, and there still aren't, frankly, many resources as far as I've looked on how to study more advanced topics when you have ADHD. So the only tool that I've been able to really use is to listen to myself and how I'm thinking about things. It's almost like a form of meditation. For example, I'll ask, as I'm working through problems and really struggling, I'll ask, why is my brain shutting down here? Am I tired, or is this just a really difficult problem? If it's difficult, do I just need to push through it, or do I need a break before coming back to it? Is it uninteresting? If so, how do I make it interesting for me? Are there similar videos on the topic? Do other textbooks or resources have better descriptions? Am I just being confused about wording, or confused about the process of problem solving in this particular way or for this particular problem? You can and should ask these same questions about anything else you might be struggling with when it comes to studying. Okay, and these are examples of questions, right? Everything I've more recently, especially what I've been trying to show is that this active questioning is there are really no right answers when it comes to questioning. And the more you let yourself question freely and be curious about how your brain is working and where it gets stuck, the better your chances will be of finding something that helps you specifically in a way that no one else would know how to figure out. Okay. Another thing to consider, and I acknowledge that it doesn't sound like you're struggling with proofs necessarily, but I'll recommend this anyway. Take a look at How to Solve It by Palia. Someone recommended it to me in grad school. It was the only book on how to think like a mathematician that made any sense to me. So in my case, there was a bit of just because I grew up in like a kind of a not fully dual lingual household, but I was raised by someone that didn't have a solid mastery of the English language. And there were all kinds of things that came up, all kinds of words or phrases that came up in math and proofs that it just didn't, I couldn't get it in my head. And so that was a big barrier to me even getting a foot in the door to start solving problems. So this book by Palia was incredibly illuminating because it really did such a fantastic job of dissecting what it means to think like a mathematician. So I recommend it. Palia, of course, is an absolute powerhouse of a mathematician. And it's very heartening to know that someone that brilliant was able to explain something in something so advanced in such simple terms, right? It's okay to dissect these things and these thought processes to a level where even like maybe even a high schooler could understand it. I also found it very helpful to sit with a tutor that did well in whichever class I was struggling with. Watching them think through problems helped smooth out a lot of confusion about the problem-solving process. And this suggestion is related to the broader idea of working with someone else if possible. It's always very, very helpful to work with someone else. In math, it becomes very tricky because the skill levels, there's even a slight difference in skill levels might make the slightly more skilled person feel a bit burdened. And if you're the lower skilled person, which I was most of the time, it's hard to get over that guilt. So, I mean, just find to the best that you can, right? Don't ruin yourself over this, but to the best that you can, find someone with approximately the same skill level. It's great if you can get along and try to work with them. But if you have to work alone, then read the material as if you'll be teaching it to yourself or a fellow classmate. Make sure that you can explain every single line in a way that makes sense to you. And in math, it's a bit tricky because you do have to learn that new language if you're new to it. This particular person has a good amount of experience, but if I'm speaking to myself when I'm starting out with math, it's not just the math part, it's not just the logic part, it really is like a new language. So there's an adjustment on your part that has to be taken before you can start saying, okay, I'm explaining these things on my terms. Nevertheless, this act of being prepared almost to reach out to other people and try to explain things to them, it's a very important thing to do, whether or not you work with someone else or, okay. As a final thought, let your curiosity do the talking. Let yourself wonder why various concepts and definitions are written the way they are. Try to take frequent steps back and question the broader goals of the text at various levels. Like, what is this sentence or paragraph or section or chapter for? Upon encountering a definition, look up or concoct examples and non-examples. Upon encountering a theorem, ask why each assumption is necessary. Can the theorem be generalized easily? Are you able to alter the proof for the theorem to hold in a simpler case? You don't even necessarily have to pursue these questions. Just asking them can be helpful. Okay. And this is a bit detailed, but I still do this. And something I often do is skip ahead a little bit, like a paragraph or two, and let myself get confused about some bit of notation or definition, and then double back to read the part that I skipped. And this just helps me stay engaged by adding an element of instant gratification. I get very confused, I start asking questions, and then I can go back by a paragraph or two and then just get that confusion resolved in a very satisfying way for me anyway. Okay, so that's as specific as it is. That's an example of a strategy that I've utilized, which I don't know if people suggest this, because it's really not a good, just generally speaking, it's not a good habit to read that way, to skip 2 paragraphs and then double back. But it's worked for me. So yeah, feel free to use that or not. Okay, so that was my advice, and then they replied with, again, some very nice questions, which I'll answer after I read through them. But I do also want to read off some of what they mentioned in reply to the questions that I asked. So they tried to do as I suggested and analyze what went wrong with algebra. And of course, I understand they still have not come to a concrete conclusion. But that's okay. This is the point of, there's not necessarily an answer you're pursuing. You're just pulling the thread of the confusion and the struggles that you were feeling. And that process is very important. So one, they said that they didn't do enough problems. And of course, then they go on to explain this is difficult to do when you fail to really grasp the objects you're working with in the first place. But I wonder if you'd agree that you sort of start to feel the ideas behind a concept as you start to prove things about it and use it in practice. Yeah, that's right. I mean, so it really is, there's a lot of practice behind this that's often understated. I think it's assumed way more often than it should be, especially these days, that there's a lot of practice, even for people that are not, even for neurotypical people, there's a lot of practice that goes on behind the scenes. Whenever I come across someone that kind of brags that they didn't think a whole lot about a problem, I get very skeptical. I think there's literally only one person I know that I suspect they actually didn't have to think a lot about problems, but at the same time they were clearly putting in a lot of energy, even if it was a short time, just a lot of energy. So it seemed like they were picking up things quickly, but it was because they were just thinking on overdrive. So that's to say, this stuff takes a lot of effort, and it's kind of an unfortunate reality when you have ADHD. You're struggling with with a hand tied behind your back. I know that's some of the advice I give is difficult to hear. I've noticed that some people they like rage quit the channel. They'll like downvote and then unsubscribe. I've seen that happen when my sub counts were a bit lower after watching a video of some study advice. I don't know how to get around it, but I'll get back to that. So let me continue with this person's reply. So point 2, they realized that they said not enough pictures. They said they're a very, very visual person, and their professor at the time did not teach algebra in a very visual way. For example, they knew how to state and how to prove the isomorphism theorems, but really that was just memorizing the textbook and putting pen to paper. It wasn't until they graduated and tried approaching Dumb It and Foot again on their own using online resources to help that they realized, oh my God, there are visual representations of these relationships. So yeah, and what's I agree. There's very few. It's very easy to teach algebra with very few pictures, and that's probably one of the reasons why I struggled so much. In my case, it was also, even if there were pictures, when it came to things like counting the number of colors, the number of different ways you can color things, my brain just kind of shut down. And because the particular professor I had, my memory is very hazy at this point. This was like over 10 years ago. The professor I had, they were a very, very, very strong mathematician. And I see that in algebra. There are some seriously strong mathematicians in algebra. Yeah, so there's a lot of assuming on the part of the professor that you will do all of the work, virtually all of the work. and that's kind of the nature of, it's just like I said, it's kind of math in general, but it's also, I mean, it's a bit more extreme in algebra as far as I can tell, and it's partly also because my brain just doesn't work that way, and that's something that's another thing that, you know, we as, especially with us as with ADHD, is we will have to struggle with, possibly more than others, right? It's hard to measure that, but yeah. Anyway, the third and final thing they mentioned before we get to the questions, they said that the textbook was too hard. I don't know if you've ever read or used Dumb It and Foot as a resource or reference material, but it's not an easy book. I have to have zero shame and work my way up to it one day. I'm in no rush and I can get there eventually. I'm sure there are gentler introductions to the subject and I should use them. So so the descriptions of that this person gave, this is an example of that legwork that's unstated that we unfortunately have to do. And then believe me, I empathize with the fact that, like, the frustration that why are we left to do all of this legwork on our own? And the professor's just like, what is the professor even there for? And what this particular person is describing is that this is, I feel very heartened because this is exactly what they should be doing. As frustrating and as wrong as it feels from the perspective of the student, this is exactly what they should be doing. Going out of their way and looking at online resources, taking advantage of every resources that they can, to whether it's to catch up or to get a better handle on the concepts, to better understand things on their terms. That's really, really important. And yeah, I get it. It's why can't professors at least say that? Yeah, it's complicated. There's a bit of a communication gap, again, especially these days. Younger people have been taught in a very different way to how professors, including myself, were taught. So there's a generational divide, there's a communication divide, but this is the right direction. And it's the right direction because if you want to go into research, no one will give you the answers. There will be no one. If you're going to be doing research, you will be at the bleeding edge of whatever topic. There are no answers. There is a right answer, but literally no one on the planet will have that answer for you. So you have to figure out how to not only make sense of the methods that you'll be using, but how to put them together in new ways to make progress. And for better or worse, that's what mathematicians are teaching their undergrads. It's this ability to learn in a very, very independent way. And I understand you might not like that, in which case mathematics is not right for you. A math major is not right for you. But for someone like this, who's very, I can feel that passion, right, and that enthusiasm. All I can say is you're absolutely doing the right thing, and you're reaching out and you're asking questions and you're being confused and you're letting yourself be confused. And I am so happy for you. And I know that sounds weird to some people, but that this is the right direction. Okay. So for their questions, okay, so let's see. Yeah, so one question: how do I determine whether a problem is difficult or not? I've never found problems particularly easy. For example, I found complex analysis intuitive because what you feel should be true in that subject just sort of is, but it was far from easy. And they spent many sleepless nights on those problem sets. And they also explained that, I guess my approach to math has always sort of been just smash the technical machinery you have available together until something works. And they also remarked that it is very inefficient. Yes. It's like they've just taken the thoughts out of my head and then put it on paper. Um, yeah, so I get it. There's some topics that are more intuitive than others, and I've spent my fair share of restless, sleepless nights on difficult problems and often failed, which was very frustrating. And I too spent an inordinate amount of time just smashing the technical machinery I had available until something worked. I love that description. And I too also felt that it was very inefficient. Um, yeah, so the answer to this is difficult because, again, it can be so disheartening to people that have already been frustrated for so long. Um, but math is not. It's it's basically designed to be as infuriating as possible, um, for especially for someone with ADHD, and obviously that's not the fundamental goal of math, but it that's what it will come across as for someone like this person and myself. Again, as far as I can tell, right? I don't know if there's a more efficient way, um, but yeah, it's this process of reaching dead ends and failing to apply methods properly and continuing to step forward even as like no, even as you feel super frustrated and you feel like you're getting nowhere. Um, oh, you got a bag around your head. I gotta get rid of my. I'll store that somewhere safer. Um, I don't know if there's a better way, because this goes with really almost any skill. But when you're developing a skill, you're often shown the right answer, which is actually that's very good. For example, I learned this when I learned guitar on my own. I hit a lot of dead ends to the point in guitar, dead ends they're really dead ends. There's nothing really useful that comes out of them. And I knew that if I had a tutor that I could, or a teacher, I could have improved a lot faster. And that's generally true for a lot of topics. If you have a good teacher, they're like a catalyst, and as a student, you're like a reagent. With the right catalyst, I mean, you can blaze through various things. But those dead ends taught me a lot. And in math, those dead ends are significantly more valuable than I think I've seen in any other skill, that at least of the skills that I've developed. Each dead end it doesn't feel like it, but it's like you're adding shape and volume and texture to an object that you don't understand yet. And the more dead ends that you're willing to, so you don't necessarily want to go out of your way to reach a dead end. It's just that you will reach dead ends on the way to finding an answer. And things that are, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a quack, but the things that are not, right, these negative results, whatever they may be, they are meaning, they give you they give you a better sense of the space that you're working with, to a greater extent than, again, in other skills. And there also has to be a bit of a balance that's struck, because there does come a point when you can't have too many dead ends. Exactly when that happens it totally depends on the problem. But for example, when I was my first semester, when I was taking a pair of proof classes, it was linear algebra and then convexity and optimization, both taught by pure mathematicians, very strong pure mathematicians. In the convexity and optimization course, there was a take-home final that took about a month. The one problem took about a month for me to solve. And it was dead end after dead end after dead end. And what I realized, what I ended up realizing was that it was like I wasn't even thinking about the problem in the right way. I was just kind of brute force jamming things together exactly like this person described. And I was at a total loss until and then I finally kind of reached out to someone that I don't know why I spoke to them, but I think they had some experience in math. I didn't have a lot of math major friends at the time, but this person had some experience, and they mentioned a proof about that used convexity. So the function being, the convexity of a function, there's a particular inequality. And then I applied the natural log to this inequality that I saw, which involved exponentials, and everything simplified, and then I was able to immediately solve the proof. So, right, so this idea of dead ends it's really tricky, because on the one hand, yes, like I said, it does give you some quality of things that you were working with. But on the other hand, you have to be careful, because yeah, if you're hitting too many dead ends and getting absolutely nowhere, I think there comes a time when you maybe do have to consider taking a step back a little bit, back further to the starting point, and considering something a little bit different. And that is something I still struggle with. That is a very, very difficult thing to master, because my brain, I love specific examples. I love calculations. I love concrete examples. And the way that math is done, it's like you have to abstract. You have to abstract all the time. You're always blindsided by abstractions in every direction, in every sense. So yeah, I know this reply is really scattered. But one, I think you're not necessarily doing the wrong thing. I think it is very helpful to mash these things together, because then you get a sense that, okay, you can't do this. And not only that, but the way that you're failing will come up again later. The way that you're failing to put things together will come up later, and you'll recognize it a lot sooner than before. And then you will know then to try something else. So that's what I mean by you're doing the right thing. It's good to fail as much as you're willing to stomach failure, because in the future these things will come up. The way that you fail will come up again, and it'll be your cue. You'll know a lot faster to try something else. In addition to that, when the ways that I failed, I often couldn't come to an actual answer, and that would leave, especially for problems where I would stay up when I would pull all-nighters and just could not solve them, they would leave a very deep, unresolved question and curiosity. And every now and then, if I was lucky, I'd come across a proof or a result somewhere else that would just immediately resolve that confusion, and it would just get seared into my head. It was so satisfying and so cathartic, right? So as frustrating as things might be, there is a potential that they get resolved later on in ways that you don't expect, at times that you don't expect. And when they do get resolved, it's just another thing in your toolbox that's it'll be there. You feel it in your blood. And I've seen descriptions where that level of understanding and internalizing these concepts, that does make you a stronger mathematician. I understand that's a lot, right? That's a lot to hear, a lot to walk into. But if nothing else, I mean, just understand that, just take it one step at a time, right? One problem at a time, one confusing line at a time. Don't necessarily worry about the bigger picture of what I said, but have a little faith in yourself that even as you're being very inefficient and feeling very frustrated, you're not necessarily doing anything wrong, right? Continue to talk to, consult people and try to look a little bit broader, because that also will help a lot. But when you're alone and in those hours of confusion, trust a little bit that you are actually helping, as counterintuitive as that feels. But that's math. I mean, I think it was von Neumann that said that you never really understand math. You just get used to it. And of course, he was a very strong mathematician. He really meant more about concepts, but I think that same idea applies in the problem solving process. Yeah, at some point you'll get used to it, and you'll get a better intuition for what types of frustration are a little potentially less useful than others. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Okay, so next question. I will use these questions you've given me to ask myself immediately, but would love some clarification with examples of times your mind decided this problem is too hard, I need a break, versus I gotta push through this. Currently, I tell myself I have to exclusively do the latter, inevitably burn out and crash, and then spew curses at my brain for not being neurotypical. It's not exactly effective. So I'm just laughing because, again, this person is like, they're reading my brain like a transcript. It's remarkable. So I empathize with the struggles, and I'm sorry that you're having to go through this. But again, I don't know if necessarily there's anything wrong being done, and I'm fully aware of what you're saying with burning out and crashing and spewing curses. I mean, I would literally hit myself in the head repeatedly, just like, why am I so fucking stupid? I'd slam my head against the wall. Why am I so stupid? I'd ask myself over and over again for years, why am I so stupid? Why am I so fucking stupid? And I would go, okay, maybe I just need to try harder. Maybe I need to push harder. And then I'd push harder than, as hard, literally as hard as I genuinely could not have pushed harder at the times that I did during undergrad. There was, I'm very self-critical, but back then I was an order of magnitude more self-critical. And even then, I was pushing myself to a point where I couldn't criticize myself for not pushing harder. There's a lot of layers to that. So I don't know this particular person's backstory, besides that they were poor. And I think, so in my case, being poor meant that I didn't have resources growing up. So I'll explain a bit of the backstory behind this, and then try to connect that to this question, and then maybe my response, if I can think of something useful. But being poor meant that I wasn't ever really challenged academically, and I know that's a very reductive statement, but that's what ended up happening. And so when I got to college, like I mentioned, I struggled like crazy with everything, because before it was like I could just memorize equations and then that was the answer. And now it was like you could know the equations, you could have a page full of equations on an exam and fail the exam. So that was my starting point. When I started pure math, I had never thought about logic, right? I've already talked about this, but I had no background whatsoever, no aptitude, nothing, just nothing. There was no reason why I should have gone into math. So this struggle that I was facing was like threefold. It was learning the proofs, learning the concepts, but also catching up to the point where I could even start implementing proofs and even start understanding concepts. When I took linear algebra, the first time I was taking pure math classes, I could not make sense of linear combinations. and therefore couldn't make sense of linear dependence, independence, couldn't make sense of basis vectors, couldn't make sense of the span, like linear combination. I could see the equation. I could see that there were coefficients, and you have a sum of these things, and I could write down the summation thing ai xi equals 0 or whatever the case may be. And I just could not make sense of this thing. What does it mean to be a? I mean, I guess this is a linear combination, but what the fuck is a span? That leap was such a struggle. So I think the pains that I put myself through was necessary to catch up, to even be able to understand what the hell a span meant. That you can alter these coefficients, and you can pick a particular, any vector in a vector space, and then alter the coefficients to reach that. And of course, if all your vectors are basis vectors, then you have a unique set of coefficients that get there. And you can repeat this for any other point in the vector space, and so on. And this idea generalizes to n dimensions and spaces with polynomials, and then so now it's a lot easier to understand these things. But I do think that frustration and that struggle was necessary, because I had to catch up, right? It was like I had never run a mile my entire life, and then I'm being asked to run a 5K. Well, I better figure out how to run a mile first. I better figure out how to jog first. I better figure out how to run without getting like blood blisters first. There's a lot that has to happen before even starting a 5K. Same idea for a marathon or a half marathon or a 400 meter or really anything, right? If you're not already in a baseline starting point, well, you better catch up. So that's what I hear from this person, is that there's a lot of catch up having to be done. And so in the sense of catching up, I don't think they're necessarily doing anything wrong. It's very important, and please don't blame yourself for not necessarily knowing these things, because it's two things, right? It's not only that not knowing is such a big part of math, and being confused is such a big part of math, but having to play catch up to even start to be confused in the right ways. These are two very difficult things that I understand the frustration. However, so the thing with the kind of cursing yourself, that's the part that, looking back, especially with how I treated myself, that part was not okay. That part was completely unnecessary. Math is by nature very frustrating. It's very difficult. You're training yourself in ways that you had maybe never conceived of. And even neurotypical people struggle with this, right? There's a reason why not a lot of people major in math. It goes down exponentially. So it's like about 10%, give or take, of undergraduates are math majors, and then 10% of those math majors go to pursue a PhD. So already we have this exponential decay, and then 10% of those, give or take, of those PhDs go on to do postdocs, and then a smaller proportion of those go on to do, a small proportion of them go on to get tenure track jobs. So there's a reason why there's this exponential decay, and in part it's because, like, why expose yourself to extremely frustrating problems for the rest of your life when you don't have to? Well, I guess I'm a little insane. I like that. I'm in math because it's difficult. But that's not for everyone. That's okay. So understand that you are pursuing something incredibly challenging. Whether or not you feel that way, whether or not you think something should be easy or not, your body's telling you that it's difficult. And if it's difficult for you, then that's, to me anyway, especially these days, I've recognized that's all that matters. I don't care if a pure mathematician in my department can find my work trivial. For me, it's not. And frankly, the ways in which it's non-trivial is not in the ways that they would recognize anyway. Um, so give yourself a bit of a break. Let yourself be frustrated, but try to figure out how you can blame yourself less. And understand, okay, this stuff is already hard for neurotypical people. We're starting, at a level below that. And I like these physical analogies of, it's like, I think I mentioned at some point that thinking with ADHD is like trying to wade through a swamp while neurotypical people are walking on a dry dirt path next to me. And they can't see the swamp that I'm wading through, so they're like, what the hell are you struggling with? What's wrong with you? Why are you being so lazy and slow? And I try to think on their terms because that's how I was raised, and I'm cursing myself for being so slow. But no, it's this is why I encourage questioning so much and listening to yourself, because your body and mind are telling you things that people are not going to understand necessarily. They're not going to see that struggle. So yeah, you might be struggling. Maybe you feel like you're struggling more than your peers. That's a valid feeling. I will say that I think pretty much everyone feels that way, unless you have like an overly inflated ego, whether or not you're neurotypical. So yeah, try to worry a little bit less about what others think of your struggles, and you will meet these people, even professors. They will be impatient with you in ways that'll make you feel inadequate, but you'll have to find a way to take that in stride. You'll have to find a way to come back to office hours again, despite that kind of little bit of hostility, and pursue these questions. And just do it. I mean, ask your questions. You have to, because they're the professor, they're the teacher, and it's their duty and responsibility to answer your questions. Respect their time, of course, right? Try not to stay like more than the hour, but it sucks. Yeah, there's a lot of factors that are kind of beyond our control that affect how we think of ourselves when as not neurotypical in these very difficult topics. But that's, at this point I've accepted that it is what it is. And to the extent that you can, I encourage you to also come to terms with that, however that may be. And it could take a while, that's okay. And if you want to hide away and not talk to your professors ever, or not talk to your peers ever, I understand that. And if that's what it takes for you to learn, then go for it. Because that's basically what I did. I had to. There was no one that really understood what I was going through, and the few people that were willing to study with me at the time, I couldn't. It was just, for various reasons, I couldn't quite learn from them. Yeah, it was very difficult. So. Take a little bit easy on yourself. If you feel tired, because this is a question, it's a really good question. Like, what times do I recognize this problem is too hard and I need a break? So there are various factors there. So this does tie in with the how to study when you have ADHD video. But when I listen to myself more carefully, I recognize when my brain is willing or unwilling to work. Because some days I will sit down and I will just, whether or not I'm on medication, sometimes I'll just sit down and just not. I'll bring myself back and then just immediately lose focus. Bring myself back, immediately lose focus. That's one of those days where I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go for a walk, like a jog or something. I just need to do something else. And there are other days where I might feel very tired, but I recognize that I can kind of sit down and I let myself sit down for 5 minutes and kind of test the waters, and I find out that I can just kind of go forward. And there are other times when maybe I feel a little bit better and don't necessarily have to worry about whether or not my brain is working. So listen to yourself and try to kind of put a finger on the pulse of your energy meter or your focus meter, whatever that is. Because with math, it's going to feel very limited, especially with ADHD. It's going to, I mean, yeah, it's you know this. I know you know, but I'm kind of talking out loud and having a stream of consciousness. And I'm sorry this video is so disorganized. So generally, my policy, my thing to start even developing habits was just do this thing of just sitting down for a few minutes and seeing if I could make some progress. And if a problem was a bit too difficult, I would further test the waters by going on to the next problem or a different problem and seeing if my brain would be more willing to engage with something else. And at every step, I'm kind of gauging my interest level and energy level. And sure, I'll be tired because, again, it's hard. You know, even at this point, as fit as I've become, I'm going to feel tired the moment I start running, right? So the tiredness I've noticed it has a different quality. Am I tired because I'm starting to exert myself, but I'm still able to push forward? Or am I tired because I am done for the day? And it's not necessarily that dichotomy. There's a whole gradient between them, but let's just really listen to yourself and see if you can tease that out. And the only way to tease that out is to try and push. And try and push a little bit and see how far you can go. And then with the crashing and burning out, that's a sign that you've pushed a little too hard. It's a sign that you haven't taken enough breaks. In my case, I mean, I've crashed, I've burned out to varying degrees for a lot of times over many years. And personally, I don't regret any of it because I like that kind of, I like knowing that it's like this undeniable proof that I've pushed as hard, I genuinely worked as hard as I possibly could. Is that a healthy mindset? I don't know. Again, I'm a little bit insane. But on the other hand, it is a sign. It is a sign that maybe you can dial it back a little bit. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous video or one of the previous videos, but having that buffer, because when you burn out, you've overspent your energy levels, and you have this like energy debt, and then you can't really think anymore. But these days, I really try to work so that there's a buffer, so that I can push a little bit more and not burn out, or I can choose to push a little. I have that much more energy, and I can get to the point beyond burnout, and the fact that I started from here means that I've just had that much more energy to put into X, Y, Z. But that's what I've settled on now. Is I have this buffer, and it might feel like wasted space that I have this energy that I could still use, but it's just because life just does shit. Life is kind of bullshit. It'll just throw shit at you, and I just need that little extra to have a buffer. When you're younger, I think when you have fewer responsibilities, it's okay to toe that line a little bit more and even go past it. And I'm out of consideration for everyone watching, I don't want to recommend kind of towing that line and pushing past it. But I will say that in my case, I've never regretted doing that, because then I knew where that line was. I have a very strong sense of where that line is, and I know exactly when I'm in that state. And when I've pushed for long enough, I know exactly when I'm about to burn out. And at this age, I need that little extra buffer. Because I just have more responsibilities, and I'm also a little bit older. I just have less energy these days. Excuse me, I don't know why my throat's all clogged up. Okay, so I think that addresses these questions. It's a good sign. Yeah, so to summarize, it's a good sign when you're pushing and feeling a little tired. Because you're learning, right? When you're confused, especially in math, and you're confused and frustrated, you really are learning. As again, as crazy as it sounds. But then when you start to get to the point of burnout, when you're younger, you might not necessarily know where that line is, but you certainly know when you do burn out. It's a sign that, okay, you've pushed a little bit too hard. Because just think down the line too. If you burn out, then you're not able to go back to the work all that quickly. And so, was it really worth the effort, all that effort, to burn out and then just not be able to work? Sometimes, yeah, you might feel like you enjoyed that. That's perfectly fine. But also consider that going up to the point before burnout and letting yourself rest and recharge means that you're more consistently able to go back to the problem. And one more thing that that occurred to me is the reason why I personally would push so hard is that I wanted to solve that problem quickly. I wanted to just get that shit done. I wanted to be smart and just knock these things out and just not necessarily be done with it because I wanted to go on to other things, although that was the case sometimes, but because I felt stupid and I felt like I needed to solve these things quickly. And if you feel that way, that is not a helpful feeling. In my case, that sensation came about because I was trained for so long to think that I need to answer questions quickly. And if I don't answer questions quickly, then I'm an idiot. And that's what school taught me. That's what a lot of K through 12 taught me. That's what a lot of my cultural background, especially with my dad, I would get hounded on for not answering immediately to various things. And the way that math works, not a good mindset to have. And sure, it's good to have various things at the top of your head. You want to be able to answer in a reasonable time, but the reasonable time is very context dependent. Sometimes, yeah, you want to answer instantly, but when it comes to a homework problem, you're not expected to answer that within 30 minutes necessarily. Okay, difficult problems. I mean, there are problems that I from undergrad that I'm certain I still wouldn't be able to solve. There are problems for undergrad that took more than a week, even though the assignment was due after a week. There were problems that took hours and hours. There were problems that took a few days. Sometimes problems were instant. But understand that the range of times in which you can answer things is just much more flexible. And you have to let yourself be willing to step away from the problem too, because your brain is working at that behind the scenes in a way that it's hard to believe. But it is working. It is working over time to make sense of things that you're confused about. And it's not going to feel like it necessarily, but it is. And you have to trust yourself. You have to trust your brain a little bit more that, okay, I'm stuck on this problem. I'm very confused. I'm going to take a leap of faith, as uncomfortable as it feels, to take a step back. I'm going to maybe go for a walk, play a game, take a nap, or just go to bed. Come back the next day, work at it a little bit. Okay, it's still not making any sense. Take a step back, go for a walk, do other homework for other classes, watch a movie, and come back to it. And you have to be willing to include breaks as part of doing homework problems. And I don't know how to describe it really, and I don't even know how to tell you how to space out these things. You will have to decide that for yourself. But it is so important. It is very, very important. There's just no learning without rest. Whether it's a passive rest where you're just taking a step back for a moment, even if it's for a few seconds, or a more active rest where you're actually sleeping and intentionally not thinking about math. Yeah, it's too bad I only realized this to verbalize this at this point in the video, but that's actually really, really important. you've already gone as far as you have. So I'm talking to this particular person. You've already gotten as far as you have. You already have the vast majority of requirements for a math major. Have a little bit more faith in your brain that it's doing its absolute best behind the scenes, whether you're sleeping or I don't know, just looking at clouds or whatever the case may be. Just trust yourself a little bit more. And I understand how uncomfortable that is, because if you're like me, you were raised to believe that your brain is this unreliable, stupid thing, but that's just not true. And this really goes for anyone watching. It's just not true. You're not as stupid as you believe. Sure, we have these deficiencies. We're not neurotypical, but that doesn't make us stupid. And we're not neurotypical in a way that seems really lazy to people that don't understand. But that's them. They don't understand. It's another thing entirely to live with the brain that we have and to continue facing challenges, to expose ourselves to challenges, despite everything, despite all that fear and anxiety and the frustration and the self-doubt. And then still to wake up the next day and do this, and do this again the next year. And this particular person, I'm very proud of them, because they were short just of an algebra sequence, and they're coming back to math because they love it so much. And I get that. Just trust yourself a little bit. I think you're doing all the right things. So I'll reply to the last part in a separate email to this particular person, because they left a short postscript. But I think that does it for all the questions. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know. Just please reach out if you have any more questions. I've gotten some nice questions from other people. Maybe I'll talk about them on this channel. And you're more than beyond welcome to remain anonymous. Yeah, and I might take a long time to reply too, but it's just because it's not necessarily because I'm physically busy, but my brain is just, at this point, I have a lot of different responsibilities, and I often like it'll if you could see like what I do moment to moment, a lot of times I'm not doing much, but it's because I need that energy to do a lot of other things. So even if it's replying to an email, sometimes I'll delay that for a while, but no matter what, I will reply, and people that have sent emails, they can attest to that. So yeah, please, questions like these are really, really helpful, because then I get to share my perspectives, and I get to encourage you at really critical moments, and give you some validation and encouragement. And yeah, I feel it's important for me to do that, because I certainly sure as hell never got any of that. Even though in hindsight I was doing a lot of things right. So thank you, and I will see you guys next time.